Okay, so this is the beginning of the refractive index measurement video. So we're here in the plant hood, and I've already sterilized all of the surfaces. I've cleaned the surface, I've cleaned the pipette and the pipette tips and everything that I brought into the hood. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sample of the media from the roots, and then we'll move over to the refractive index machine and measure the refractive index. So the first thing I'll do is sterilize these tweezers, which all I'm going to use those for is to remove the sponge cap from the root culture. Going to need this in a second, so I'll light that. This is now sterile, at least the tip of it is. Use that to remove, this isn't dripping very well. Very well at all. That's weird. Okay, so I'm going to use different tweezers. Please, that'll work. Wait for that to be sterilized. While that's sterilizing, I'm just going to take note. This sample that I've labeled already, you always want to, I'm just going to take this right over the refractive index, so there's not too much chance of me confusing it, but I labeled it just to be getting the practice of labeling things. You always want to label things whenever possible. This is not actually sterile. I've wiped down the outside of it with ethanol. The inside is not sterile, but it doesn't need to be, because all we're doing is putting in the media. We're going to take it right over the refractive index machine and take the measurement. So this does not need to be sterile. Let's try this again. There we go. I don't know what was up with those other tweezers. Okay. Now we'll put this there. Okay. So I've autoclaved these tips, brought them into the hood. And for reasons I'll explain later, we've found that 300 microliters is the perfect amount of sample for the refractive index machine. So just to make sure I can pipette all that up properly when I get to the machine, I'm going to take a 500 microliters of sample right now. So we'll go into the roots. Obviously want to avoid sucking up any roots as much as possible. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. Put that in there. Okay. Now we will flame this again. Grab Okay, now we'll move it on over to the refractive index machine. Here is the refractive index machine, or refractometer, and what this does is it measures the sugar content in a solution. So here's the sample we took from the roots, and as it turns out, you can use this device to measure the growth of roots, because what happens is there's sugar in the media, the roots consume the sugar, and which is correlates to growth. So we take progressive measurements of the sugar content of the media from a root sample, and based on how the concentration of sugar decreases, we can correlate that with the growth of the roots, or whatever organism is growing in the sugary media. So what we have to do with this machine, we first have to calibrate it with millicue water. So I've already measured that out, have it in this little tube right here. So first thing you do, I've already allowed it to warm up. You have to turn it on, let it warm up for a couple minutes. So I'll hit initiate. And we'll wait on that. And we'll wait some more. Great. Okay, now it's got a couple different modes. The current mode, as it says, is index. What we want is index TC, which stands for index temperature controlled. The measurement actually depends on the temperature. So what this will do is when you set it to index temperature controlled, it'll take the measurement and then adjust for what the temperature is in the room we're doing it. And as you can see, it also measures the well temperature down here. I don't know if you can see that. But so we'll hit mode, change it to index TC. Then what we'll do is this, it says add distilled water to sample well and allow to equilibrate, and then press calibrate. This has been sitting at room temperature, so it shouldn't need to equilibrate at all. So I'll take some of that and add that. Now for taking the refractive index measurement, the only thing that actually matters is that it cover this little area down here, this black area, which is just a piece of glass. We've found just from doing it that 300 microliters is the perfect amount to cover the area without adding too much sample. So that's what we're going to add. So I'm going to set my pipette to 300 microliters. Okay. And I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it covers the area almost perfectly. I would say perfectly. So we'll close that. It goes down. Okay, so we've allowed it to equilibrate, so we're just going to press calibrate. And it reads 1.3329 is the reading, which if you check the manual for this machine is what it's supposed to read for distilled or milli-Q water. You can see here it says reference temperature. You may or may not remember or be able to see, but before it said about 25 degrees Celsius. So this is what the temperature correction will do for you. It'll correct it for the reference temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. So it says press setup to continue, so we'll do that. And now it's ready to go. Now you can put your actual sample in. So I'm just gonna wipe off the milli-Q water. They recommend to just briefly clean with ethanol before doing a measurement, so I'll just briefly, a little bit of ethanol, wipe this off. Okay, so here's the sample we took before from the hood, from the root culture. So that's what I'm going to pipette from now. Again, just 300 microliters is how much we're going to add. And if you remember, I took 500 before just to make sure we can pipette easily without any bubbles forming. There we go. And now we just have to hit read. And so this has a measurement of 1.33645. I forget exactly what the correlation is, but that's something, this correlates to the mass percent. I forget exactly. I believe that means I don't remember off the top of my head, but this number correlates to the mass percent of sugar in the media, specifically sucrose in the media, which is the sugar source we use for B5 media, which is what we grow our roots in. So that's it. One last thing I forgot, of course, you're going to want to, after you're done, clean your sample well with a wipe. Spritz it with ethanol again. That looks good. And now it's ready for the next person that wants to use it. Just adding one more part. I was realizing from before when we did this measurement that the distilled water measured at 1.33299, and that the root sugar, which should have sugar in it, measured at 1.33645, which didn't make much sense that there'd be that small of a difference between distilled water and roots. And I realized that the reason for that is because I had it set on the wrong mode. This mode that we used before, index TC, is a direct measurement of the refractive index. This is not the brick scale, which I had mentioned earlier, which provides you with a direct correlation between mass percent of the sugar in the media. So what you would want to do is move it over to solids TC, which gives you the mass percent of the sugar in the media. So if you got a reading of, for example, 3.0 solids TC, that correlates to 3 grams of sucrose in 100 grams of whatever your solution is, presumably a water-based solution. So I'm not going to redo the entire sample, but you're going to the easiest way is to do it on solids TC, which is solids temperature controlled, which will give you the best measurement. If you for some reason did want to directly measure the refractive index, then you would use index TC, and that'll give you the direct measurement of the refractive index in the correct units. So that's that.